Welcome back. This week I'm covering another very common symptom that women struggle with as their hormones decline in perimenopause: anxiety. So, anxiety is constant worrying that gets in the way of your day to day life. You may feel fear, anticipation, or even physical symptoms like sweating, nausea, shakiness, shortness of breath, chest pain, and even heart palpitations. Obviously, it can be really scary and affect your quality of life. So, anxiety disorders are actually the most prevalent mental illness in the US, affecting 40 million adults aged 18 and older. Now, women are about twice as likely as men to be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and take anti anxiety medications. And about 15 to 50% of perimenopausal women may experience anxiety, often accompanied by depression, insomnia, and even forgetfulness. In fact, anxiety is one of the main symptoms that women reach out to me about. Because unfortunately, a lot of healthcare providers aren't addressing the underlying imbalances that are associated with anxiety. They may address your thoughts, your mindset, and or trauma, which yes, these things should be addressed, but there's typically more to the story. And as a functional health coach, my job is to dig deeper, to look at factors such as hormone imbalances, gut dysfunction, unmet nutritional needs, and more. So let's dive into some of these things, okay? As you know, hormones are changing drastically in perimenopause. So, some specific hormone imbalances that are linked to anxiety are: one, low progesterone. Progesterone is our calming hormone. We love it, we need it, but we are losing it after the age of 35. The next one is estrogen dominance, or what I prefer to explain as unopposed estrogen, because we're losing progesterone. We need both progesterone and estrogen to balance each other out. Again, progesterone is more calming, estrogen is more stimulating. So when we're losing that progesterone, we're going to feel the effects of the unopposed estrogen. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have too much estrogen. It typically means that you don't have enough progesterone. Now, if you've been paying attention and listening to some of the prior episodes, the third imbalance is low estrogen. So in perimenopause, your estrogen is fluctuating wildly from day to day. It could be high one day, it could be low another day. Both of these can contribute to anxiety. All right, the other thing to think about is cortisol. So that is your stress hormone. That can be elevated due to a number of emotional and physical stressors on the body. But over time, with chronic stress, your body has a hard time making cortisol. So then it could be low. Both high and low cortisol have been linked to anxiety. Lastly, I want you to think about your thyroid. I've talked about thyroid on previous episodes, whether you have a sluggish thyroid known as hypothyroidism, or you're making too much thyroid hormone in the case of hyperthyroidism. Both of these can contribute to anxiety. All right, now that we've covered some of the common hormone imbalances, I want to talk about some other things that can be contributing to your anxiety that you may not even be thinking about. So the first one is blood sugar imbalance. Oh my goodness. A lot of women mistake blood sugar imbalance for anxiety. And what causes blood sugar imbalance? You're not eating enough, or you're not eating enough of the right foods. I see this over and over and over again with clients. You got to be eating more food. You got to be eating 3 times a day. They have to be well-balanced meals with ample protein. So protein is going to help balance blood sugar. It's going to keep you satiated for hours. Not to mention that it's going to have the nutrients that you need for brain health, like amino acids, minerals, and B vitamins. So I've talked about this on previous episodes, but again, when it comes to protein, you want to aim for your ideal body weight in grams per day. So for example, if you want to weigh 130 pounds, you want to aim for 130 grams of protein per day, preferably animal protein. You can mix with some plant protein, but please don't rely on plant protein alone, because you need the bioavailable nutrients from animal protein. All right, that brings me to mineral imbalances. So you may have an imbalance of magnesium or zinc. Those are typically related to anxiety, or you may be even dealing with copper toxicity. This is actually more common than you think, especially in women who have been on hormonal birth control. And if you have been using a copper IUD for years, it is very likely that you have a copper issue. All of these things can contribute to anxiety. Next is gut imbalances. So in the US, about 60 million people struggle with digestive issues like acid reflux, constipation, IBS, and an estimated 40 to 60% of those people also struggle with anxiety disorders like panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, social phobia, and PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder. So, yes, there is a connection. Your gut affects everything. Your gut has an ENS or enteric nervous system that communicates with your CNS, your central nervous system, via your vagus nerve. That is the longest nerve in your body. And there are specific strains of gut bacteria that stimulate this nerve, which regulate your heartbeat, maintains your pace of breathing, reduces stress hormones, and thus anxiety. And there's also specific gut bacteria that is needed to convert amino acids like tryptophan and glutamate into serotonin. So about 95% of serotonin, which is known as your happy neurotransmitter, is made in your gut. And then lastly, you have GABA. That is your calming, anxiety, and fear reducing neurotransmitter that is also made in your gut. And progesterone and GABA go hand in hand. So as we lose progesterone, we're starting to lose GABA as well. All right, so the other thing I want you to think about, of course, is your lifestyle. Are you getting outside in nature on a daily basis? Are you going for morning walks or afternoon walks? These are game changers for our clients. Are you prioritizing sleep? Or are you staying up really late? Are you on your phone? Are you watching Netflix? Are you working or checking email instead of creating a relaxing nighttime routine to let your body know that it is time for rest? The other thing is, are you overcommitting? Are you thinking that you can do it all? You're not asking for help. Are you multitasking constantly? That is a recipe for overwhelm and anxiety. Next, are you consuming too much alcohol? I know this stage of life, it is very common. You go out with your friends, you go to book club, there's social events, and there's always alcohol present. But in this stage of life, it is not benefiting you. And if anything, it can exacerbate your anxiety or make it worse. So really think about your relationship with alcohol. The other thing to think about is, are you eating a lot of high histamine foods? A lot of women don't realize that some of the very healthy foods that they're eating are high in histamine, and that can exacerbate anxiety. And especially if you're dealing with anxiety before your period, that PMS anxiety, it can be due to the rise in estrogen. So estrogen and histamine have a connection. So when estrogen rises, so can histamine. And if you're eating a lot of these high histamine foods, it can make your anxiety worse. All right, the next thing to think about is your mindset. Do you tend to think of the worst case scenario? Do you think that others are judging you or out to get you? Do you send yourself into a deep swirl of ruminating thoughts instead of letting things go? Repeatedly thinking of the worst case scenario or the worst thing will happen, or seeing the worst in others versus giving the benefit of the doubt, is going to create more stress in your body. And that's going to ramp up those stress hormones like adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. And this is going to keep your body in a constant state of fight or flight. Your thoughts are incredibly powerful. They can either be paralyzing or they can be freeing, but you can choose to think differently. And over time, you can rewire your brain and unlearn those patterns that contribute to your anxiety. This is called neuroplasticity. It's very interesting. You can work with a therapist on this, but I will link a source in the show notes so that you can learn more. All right, we covered quite a bit, but now I want to just kind of give you some action steps to take. So obviously, balancing blood sugar is a big one. I talked about this before. I've talked about it on previous episodes. Making sure that you are eating enough food and making sure you're eating enough protein throughout the day. You want to be eating a nutrient-dense diet consisting of mostly whole foods, okay? You don't want to be relying on takeout or fast food. That stuff is not nutrient dense. Really take care of your body in this stage of life. Give it what it needs, nourishing foods. I want you to consider a low histamine diet, particularly if you have really bad PMS anxiety, and minimize that alcohol consumption. You want to address those mineral and gut imbalances that I mentioned, consider working with us in the Hormone Rescue, or currently we have Perimenopause Made Easy where you can get some testing. Consider some of the lifestyle changes that I mentioned, optimizing sleep, getting out for walks in the morning, in the afternoon. These can be really helpful if you struggle with anxiety. And, work with a therapist. Don't be ashamed to work with somebody to help you address some of these thought patterns that you have, or addressing some trauma that you may have experienced. And obviously, you want to address hormone imbalances. I mentioned some of the common hormone imbalances that are associated with anxiety, but you may want to talk to your provider about starting some oral micronized progesterone. Progesterone is neuroprotective. It is very helpful for women with anxiety, sleep, and even mood issues. But again, you want to ask for oral micronized progesterone versus a cream. That has been studied more for anxiety. All right, and then some supplements to consider are L-theanine, that's very calming. GABA, again, I mentioned GABA earlier. You can take it in supplement form. I personally like it either in a lozenge or a powder that you can add to your water. Some herbs are ashwagandha or holy basil. Those are considered adaptogens, and they help your body adapt to stress. Kava is something else, Kava, that has been shown to help with anxiety. Obviously, magnesium is my go-to for a mineral. I would go with magnesium glycinate form. And something else to have on hand that is super cheap is chamomile tea. That is something that my grandmother always gave me when I was young to help with sleep, but it has been shown to help with anxiety as well. All right, and then the other thing to think about is taking a quality B complex. Many women are deficient in B vitamins due to low stomach acid, the standard American diet, underconsumption of protein, and even long-term use of oral contraception. It can cause deficiencies in B vitamins. So B vitamins, specifically B1, B6, and even B12, support adrenal gland function, and that's going to give you a more positive stress response. In fact, a high intake of vitamin B6 is associated with a lower risk of anxiety and depression in women. So what you want to look for is not just any B6, you want activated B6. It's also known as P5P. Pyridoxal 5-phosphate. That is the form that you want to be looking for because that's going to help you absorb magnesium, which, as you know, is a crucial mineral that is needed to make progesterone. It regulates your stress response and even enhances GABA activity. B6 is also known for producing and regulating the neurotransmitters dopamine and serotonin. Low levels of dopamine have been linked to anxiety, while low levels of serotonin have been linked to depression. Now, B6 is also going to support a healthy estrogen metabolism, and that's going to help relieve some of those histamine issues that I mentioned earlier, which can be a main culprit of PMS anxiety specifically. Now, the last thing to consider is minimizing or removing caffeine from your diet. I am not here to take your coffee away, especially if you love it. Coffee can be really beneficial to your health. I love it every now and then, but caffeine specifically is a CNS or central nervous system stimulant. And obviously that's found in coffee, that's found in chocolate, and those energy drinks. Please don't drink those energy drinks. They are not only going to be high in caffeine, but they're typically going to be high in sugar as well. And that is just a double whammy. It is not benefiting you. If you are dealing with fatigue, you need to address the why behind it. I personally drink decaf on occasion, but I mostly will drink matcha. If you follow me on Instagram, you know I'm a big fan of matcha. I have it pretty much every morning. Sometimes I have it twice a day. I love it. I like to add a little bit of dairy-free creamer, a little bit of vanilla extract. But matcha, if you don't know what that is, it's ground up green tea leaves, and it's going to give you a lower level of caffeine than you would get in coffee, but it helps with focus and it gives you sustained energy versus a jolt of energy. Now, it also has L-theanine. That was something that I mentioned earlier. That is a calming amino acid, and it has been shown to relieve stress, improve your mood, and even maintain good sleep. All right, I hope that episode was helpful to you. If you know somebody who struggles with anxiety, please share this with them, and I will talk to you next week.